I'll just delay the intro. Are we on? Well, good morning, Council. Welcome along to the Environment Community Committee meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council for the month of December. This meeting is open to the public and also live streamed. So I'd like to thank those with us in the room today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council's social media channels. Acknowledge CEO Brian Pidgeon, the Acting General Manager Environment Community, Mr. Hugh Dunn, and the other many staff and general public in the gallery with us today. Thank you for being with us for the Environment Community Committee for the month of December. Also acknowledge Councillor Tim McMahon, a portfolio lead will be with us within moments. Wish to acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse the lands that we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Djarawar and Guyabal peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge-rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first people. Item 2 today, attendance, including apologies, leaves of absence. I don't believe we have any of those today. No? So we'll go straight to item 3, Council. So this one is the approved systematic inspection program for dog registration, dog microchipping and cat microchipping, and approved selective inspection program of places in Toowoomba Regional Council area where declared dangerous dogs and declared menacing dogs are kept. I might hand straight over to Mr. Kevin Jeffries.
Thank you. Morning, councillors. This is a standard report we've put up probably 3 or 4 times now to council over the last 3 or 4 years. It is an inspection program where we do look for unregistered dogs and unmicrochipped dogs and cats. And the second part of it is around the inspection of regulated dog, which is our focus to have completed every year. That's to ensure that the dog owners are complying with all the conditions that are set with regulated dogs. So that is a focus of ours, but we are looking at how we actually deliver the program from January for 6 months, and we will be looking at a number of ways of doing that. Obviously staff on the ground, but utilising all of the resources of ERS, so we will have a number of blitzes and using staff to canvass different areas. Mail outs and letterbox drops, and all the supervisors and animal management will be involved in the inspection program as well. Now we've got some new staff on board, and we'll use this as a training exercise for them, and we're still advertising for other staff, so we're slowly building up our capacity in that area as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillors, there's a recommendation there before you, but are there any questions in regards to this matter? Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kevin. I did notice in there that there was no financial impact and that you'll have your normal contingency of staff in place. Is that correct? And I just wondered if there's no requirement for extra staff to do this specific these inspections. What do the staff do when they're not doing this in a normal year?
Outside of the inspection program, they are obviously doing a lot of their time is spent investigating dog attacks. So we deal with, on average, we deal with about 45 to 50 dog attacks every month, and they are significant in the investigation that we need to do. But all the other complaints that we get that come through, barking dog complaints, all of those types of complaints, as well as running the pound side of things, so cleaning the pound, feeding the animals, caring, working with RSPCA, they are busy. They are very busy with the work they have to do. So this is an additional thing that we try to incorporate and try and do it as more of a blitz of areas. So they're not out there every day doing it, but we do target certain areas and certain suburbs because of some of the history we know with unregistered dogs or complaints about dogs in particular in those suburbs, and incorporate it into their day-to-day, try to incorporate it into their day-to-day work. There may be some overtime, but that's all allowed for in our budgets at the current time.
Rightio, thank you. So I guess that the area will ensure that all those other duties are carried out as well. And I guess when reading this, I was really aware, and I'm sure all the councillors around the table are, that the video that we all saw of enticement and whatever, that was all recorded at a home. I'm sure there's been staff training around that, but to ensure that we don't see that again, I just wonder, can you explain to me what a regulated dog is, please?
Yeah, it's one we declare either as a dangerous dog or menacing. There's two categories. They're all called regulated dogs, and it's where that dog normally has attacked either another animal or has attacked a person. So I know you had a query around the one that was in the media recently. That regulated dog has been declared as a dangerous dog because it severely injured a person, and we're looking at further penalties against that owner, whether that's prosecution we are considering. We're still finalising some of the information around that before we decide the next step.
Okay, thank you. And obviously that's all in progress, but I must admit that when I saw that response to the media yesterday, I was concerned that that a dog owner may be getting off scot-free for what I saw as a terrible thing to do, to have his dog maul somebody and then drive off and leave that person.
Oh.
And so I'm really quite concerned about that, and we must keep our community safe. And, you know, we ourselves, if we go for a walk, we don't expect to be attacked by a dog, so, or anything really, but a dog particularly, because the thought of that is pretty scary.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Councillor Shine.
Thanks, Chair. I think Kevin has touched on what I was going to ask about, but I was just wondering whether I think what I understood from what you said was that the shortage of personnel is being overcome, or in process of being overcome. But the written report sort of indicated, I think, that you were still down a couple, and is that right? So things have improved since then?
Things are improving. We're still down on staff, and it's difficult to find, like everywhere, and everyone and every business is struggling to find staff, and we are too. So we have employed 3 people in the last 3 months and done some training with them, and we'll be using those staff as well as our supervisors and the principal that's down at Animal Management. But I am looking at using all of ERS staff, so it's about 60 staff, those that are prepared to assist, to do some blitzes as well. We did it with we did that with the water when we had water shortages. We did that with the staff, and it worked well. And we could swamp different areas, not a good word for water shortage, but we could go out and hit an area very quickly with 40 staff on the road.
Is it the type of work that somebody on the Tempo scheme might be able to be capable of being trained up to?
I'm very cautious about that, because there's a lot of training that needs to be given to the people, and as you all know, dogs can be unpredictable, and that's the last thing I would want to do, is put untrained people in that situation. And the other thing with that is we have other councils have had contractors come in, but it becomes like a bounty to them.
The other question relates to where the inspections will take place. It says in a residential area, which in Toowoomba is the whole of Toowoomba basically, and then it says that you will be doing letterboxing, I presume to alert people that you might be calling, which might sort of defeat the purpose of a surprise visit. So do you advertise which suburbs you will be they will be inspecting, or not?
No, we don't. We advertise, we have to advertise that we are doing the inspection program, the time it starts from and time it finishes, and the local, not the local areas, the areas, which is the rural residential and residential areas, but we don't advertise the different suburbs.
Right.
Letterbox drops is an option, is one way of us getting the message out, but we don't have to do that in certain suburbs.
But if you did, it would be, say, to the whole of Toowoomba rather than to
Yes,
North
yeah.
Toowoomba or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Shine. Councillor McMahon.
Oh, Chair, thanks. Look, I'm just, Kevin, good to see you. My questions were fairly similar to Councillor Shine. But if you could pass on my regards to Jason and his team, they do a tremendous job, and they have been. And usually when I get these calls, I forward them on to you, and the team are always amazing to work with, and they do a spectacular job. I was going to ask about workload from the other side of Councillor Summerfield, that we have a little too much on our plate with this, but you've answered this. My only concern is in the recommendation, number 3, that a systematic program be undertaken of all residential and rural areas. And I don't, from what you're saying, we're not going to go to every single house in Toowoomba, urban and rural. You know, operationally that can't be done. So are you happy with that recommendation, or?
Yes, I am, because what we will target different areas within the residential areas. If we limited it to just specific suburbs or townships, then if we've got problems and we identify problems in other areas, then we're limited, we can't go there.
Sure.
So it's just giving us the flexibility to do whatever area is needed. And with the regulated dogs, they are all over the different residential
Oh yeah,
areas.
the other one of that, the selective inspection, yeah, they're all over. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. Councillor Carol Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kevin, congratulations to your team. They do a great job. I have 2 questions, if you don't mind. The first one, I think I know the answer to, but we're almost over the dogs that weren't compulsorily microchipped, and there are some older dogs that those people, I know of a few, have a letter from their vet to say it's too traumatic to have them microchipped. That suffice for your inspection?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And the second one, I am hearing quite a few people with what happened out at Ernest Peak Park and whatever, and some of our off-leash dog parks, behaviour of owners is sometimes disgraceful, and they just take their dogs in there and let them go, and they're large dogs, and people like myself and people with small dogs or whatever, dogs by nature are a pack animal, and if one starts, you know, so is there anything we can do, perhaps by signage or whatever? I know out at Valeview when I had a mauling of my dog out there, and I think that caused his death. I was fortunate, I was close to the toilet, so I locked myself in the toilet and used the phone, but and our policy is not to sign any parks that aren't off-leash dog parks. We assume that everybody knows that their dog should be on leads anyway. That is not the case. And I'm wondering in those, you know, more open and rural parks like that, I know we have signage at Railview now, I know we do, or we did have, I'm not there now, but I just think it'd be helpful to say where the car park is, all dogs must be on a lead. And I know we shouldn't have to do it, I know it's in our policy that that it's accepted that they should be, but actually people don't know. And they just pull up and let their dogs go, and that's one thing. But the second thing, at our off-leash dog parks, we shouldn't have to, I know this, but should we have something there to say that if you have an aggressive dog or a large, they should be under control? I know they're supposed to be, but is there anything we can do? Because there's more and more, this is where these things are happening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Two things around that. The signage, we have tried that. As soon as we put it up, it's torn down and thrown away, or taken away. But as we get more staff on board, we do have a program of checking the off-leash parks, and we have officers that start early in the morning and finish early, and then we've got some that will start later in the day but finish later in the day, so we can catch when people are more likely to be at those off-leash parks. but we're working to getting the staff numbers up to be able to do that again.
So with the signage, could we not put it on the fence to make it more, could we not
Yeah, we can
make
have
it
a-
more
we can have a
permanent, or?
Yeah, we'll have a look at what we
Again,
can.
you're dealing with a small minority of people, but, you know, that's where sometimes the tragedies occur. And the lady, I know she's a friend of mine, the one that was injured, but it's going to take her a long time to get over it. Had that been a child, possibly
Who knows?
been a fatal outcome. So, you know, I think that we probably need to take a bit more aggressive. It's not our fault and it's not our job, but it probably would be good if we could do something in that space.
We'll have a look at it.
I'll leave it with you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Carl?
Happy to move, Chair.
If there are no further questions, me, you didn't have a question, happy to second it? Is that what you're putting your hand up for?
I was going to ask a question.
Sure, so I'll go, so I've got to move it, so Councillor One's happy to second it. I'll go back to his question, so Mayor and Tony, you have a question?
The only question I have.
Would you like to turn your microphone on, please, Mayor?
Time I'm involved with a complaint of this nature, there's a tremendous amount of emotion involved, and very often the people who are in fact the target of the work are not aware of what their responsibilities are, or make it clear they're not. Some of the people who go around to these particular places would need to have some fairly solid training, wouldn't they, in terms of how to actually deal with this? And in recent days, I've had one that you know, the fault is all on the dog owner's side, and I think our people probably copped a bit in that one. So I'm just wondering if we're looking after them, and secondly, the kind of training they get.
Yep. Certainly the animal management officers are trained and are trained around behaviours of dogs and what to look for and those types of signs, and even when entering property, doing certain things like, you know, shaking the gate before you enter, and they do have safety equipment with them. When I was talking about using all of ERS, I wouldn't use those staff to go onto private property, but we can do street survey and identify whether there's a dog on a property without having to go on the property. Then we can research our database around registered dogs, and then our animal officers can go into those properties that's identified as an unregistered dog.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. A question?
Just wondering what the current costs are to dog owners to microchip and to register at the moment.
I'm not sure the cost of microchipping. I think it's around $80, but don't quote me on it. Registration depends on type of dog you've got. If it's a D6 dog, it's $45 at the moment.
All right, thanks, Councillor Shine. If there are no further questions, I've got a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Does anyone wish to go into debate? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, Kevin. Councillor, that takes us to item 4, which is the Rural Halls review. I'll hand over to Acting General Manager Hugh Dunn to introduce this one, and Amanda Barb, who's the Acting Property Services Manager. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Council. We have before us here today the Rural Halls Review and an accompanying report setting out the issues and some of the future planning. Rather than go through that report in detail, I'm happy to take it as read and respond to any questions.
Thanks, Hugh. Any questions, councillors, in regards to this one? Councillor Carroll?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Read through and you know, understand Council's position and some of the halls, and congratulate the team for doing a good job on documenting those things. I have a few concerns. In the early 1900s, schools were taken to where the children were rather than the other way around. And I know the Wairima school was moved 3 times. It happened everywhere. The schools were taken to where the children were because we didn't have the transportation that we have now. Halls were built where communities were because they were the centre of the communities. Now, in this whole report, there is nothing given to social obligation or the sense of creating community. So we've said in there that everyone can drive particularly a certain way, a certain distance and everything else. And probably I would say to you then, why is anything anywhere and why doesn't everyone come into Toowoomba? It's not the case. People identify or should identify with the village that they live in. So why have we not, then on the other hand, we've offered and said that there should be all these things like meeting rooms and other things that these small communities haven't even asked for. Haven't even requested. And I know some of these facilities, we're not going to go out and build a new facility in every place and every community that's got a hall. So whilst I see the report for what it is, and it's a very good documentation of what's there, I think pointing out that there's not this and there's not that and there's not something else in a small rural community it's useless to me, because I've lived in small communities all my life. It's the first time I've lived in a city. And at the end of the day, the volunteers and the people that are in those communities, P's and C's, whatever they are, hall committees, and you know, we're hitting an area where there are fewer volunteers in everything, but those people try to engender a sense of community in those areas, and most places, the only thing they have is their hall. They have their meetings in it, they do other things in it, and sometimes just meet in people's houses. So, I mean, I see that, and I know that, you know, we have to financially and responsibly use our community's money, but surely they didn't ask for amalgamation, and I have to say to you that if they were in their shires, I don't believe that this would even be considered. So, you know, I know that you know, some of them aren't used, I see that, and that requires a conversation because the community has changed. But some of them are being used and they just haven't got the capacity to maintain or upgrade them. And yes, they do need like access and all those things. But at the moment, some of those halls are quite adequate for what the use of them is, and it creates a sense of community. And I don't see anywhere in there where we have mentioned that, how important it is to that community. And I suggest that by the very use of it, that tells you, the very use of some of those halls, that tells you how much they're prized by the community. I'm not criticising the report in any way. All I'm saying is that particular facet and aspect is not recognised. I don't believe that everyone should come into Toowoomba or to a big centre to go to something. I think they deserve to have some of their own things in their own community. And I think it's a little bit disheartening, and this is a public report, isn't it? Yes, so it's not out there yet, but I think when it goes out there, some of our volunteers out in our rural communities are going to be very alarmed. So I'd like to see somewhere in a report like this, some sort of a community obligation and how much it means and what it means to the ongoing presence and pride in that particular community, and how much that particular facility is the centre of that community. Sorry, I probably didn't put it well, but that's what I think. Thanks.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. If the intent and the understanding of the importance of community halls hasn't come through in the report, that's something that we do need to look at. From my perspective, from my review of the report, I felt it did, in terms of understanding the importance of halls, and the very fact we're undertaking the review, I guess, from my perspective, underlines the importance of community facilities in rural communities. We spoke to, as part of this process, and a lot of this work was done prior to my arrival, but all of the community groups who manage community halls, whether they be through council leases or through ownership, were spoken to directly. In my time here, and the general feedback from talking to hall committees is that they're actually waiting for this report, because they understand that some of the obligations they have as either owners or managers of halls are generally unsustainable. They have difficulty attracting volunteers, they have difficulty maintaining their facilities, and I guess that from my perspective, working on this, there's certainly a strong perspective in the community in terms of a council as custodians of the community and as stewards of the community to present some strategic direction on the way forward as to how we maintain the tradition of our community halls but make sure that they're sustainable into the future.
Thanks, Hugh. And I think just if you have a look at page 15 or the second page of the report there as well, I think Councillor Taylor, that probably sums up that sentiment around probably the first line actually. Community halls are valued public infrastructure, interaction, socialisation and involvement, residents, community life, etc. to try and I guess take in that exact element that we're sort of talking about, as you said, the sense of community and what it means to those communities is probably identified. As I said, it's on page 15 of board books in that report as a background. So
Actually, interesting how the ones that aren't in our ownership are treated, and I don't see the Felton Hall in there at all. Did I miss it? Is it in there, or did I miss it? Is it there? I know that, but neither is Wairema, and neither are some of the other halls. I'm very aware of it. Thanks.
So the difficulty with the hall network is, as you've outlined, Councillor Taylor, they're not all owned by council, but whether they're council owned or whether they're owned by the community, they essentially serve the same purpose, and they have the same drivers, and they have the same, I guess, constraints. So in doing this, there is an attempt to, I guess, work with both the council-owned and the non-council owned, because our CDFT team, and I was with Daryl Bates just recently in talking to community halls, and our organisation works with both council-owned and non-council-owned to support them. So from an asset management perspective, our focus is on the ones that we own, but from a community development perspective, we need to consider all of the halls.
thanks, Hugh. We've got Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Hugh. Look, underpinning all of this obviously is our desire to ensure that everybody has their community hall, because for some of those communities that's all they do have as a way of gathering socially. But this is a great asset for us to have, so that we've got an understanding of where we sit with our halls, and I think this is the second one that's been done since I've been on council. There has been one done previously. My only concern is in relation to the validity of the commentary in here, and I raise this because, quite seriously, because Clifton Dabblers, it's saying that the facility is in good condition and meets the needs of the user group well. Well, I've been in discussions probably 6 months ago now with them. They desperately need to expand. It doesn't suit them well at all. It's far too small. They're in very cramped conditions. They have trouble trying to do their arts and crafts that they do there. They were very interested in the SES building at the back and had hoped that they could utilise that, and haven't been able to get that because the SES are saying they continue to require that for storage or such. So given that that is quite incorrect, it worries me that others may have faults as well. And moving forward, once we start looking at these down the track, this is just my view and my view only. Because of the importance I see of these halls, I would like to see us, you know, it's all very well to get this great big long report with all these different buildings in it. I would like to see us get half an hour, once a week, once a fortnight, to be briefed on one of them, so that we fully understand them, and so that we know that we're doing the right thing by the community when we make decisions about anything that we might be doing to them. And by that I don't mean to say you're going to put a new pair of stairs in, a new set of stairs in. I mean that anything that's going to be done that's going to require a reasonable amount of money and may or may not impact that community, that we be briefed on it. I just think that's too important, these halls. They're as important as libraries, the halls, to those people in those communities. Oh, one other thing. this one's just a bit of interest. The Pittsworth Soldiers Memorial School of Arts. What is that? I've never been in it. What is it used for? Does it actually open to the public, or is it just somewhere for people to gather? Or
I'll have to get back to you on that, Councillor Summerfield. I couldn't give a specific answer as to that one, but I can certainly find out and get
just
back to you.
email it to us. Thanks a lot, here.
You want to add some context to that? Happy to add a little bit of context to that. They're actually, so the RSL meet there, and they've actually got, it's almost their memorial, if you like, and they've got a lot of memorabilia and what have you there as well. It's actually worth going to have a look at. I think it is open to the public. I'm not sure what hours though, but it's definitely open then, but I think it's open other times as well. It's well worth a look at. There, mate, there. Yep.
So thanks, Councillor Summerfield. So I've got Councillor Carl.
No, I was just happy to move, Chair. I think it's an obvious and sensible step forward and responsible for us to do this.
Okay, I've just got Councillor McMahon raising his hand. Are you happy to second? Yeah, that's all right. Well, I'll go again. So I've got a mover and a seconder, but I've got multiple questions, so I'll go around the ring with that. So you didn't have any questions, Councillor Carl? Just that was happy to move. So yeah, so I'll go to Councillor Harris-Sullivan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Hugh. And I just wanted to pick up on a point that Councillor Carol Taylor was talking about the fact that there's the role of the social element to these. I think, you know, in that facility health check where you've got operational, social, emergency and economic, I think that's fairly much addressing the role of its social importance. But Hugh, maybe I missed it there. Is there somewhere in the thinking about the rationalisation of these halls about what the alternative to those communities, if they were to lose their facility, you know, say like with the waste facilities that, you know, you can drive to a certain, it'd have to be within whatever distance or whatever. So that's the first question is I know in Clifton there's a few different alternatives, and also where some of them are very underutilised, say for instance the Oakey Showgrounds Hall, I just wonder about the sense of then spending money, making them, you know, either compliant or, you know, why would we do that? If they're not falling into the, you know, get rid of it or whatever. I can't remember the terminology. It wasn't that, rationalise. If they're not falling into that category, then why would we be spending money? Particularly if it's acknowledged that they're very underutilised.
And that is, through you, Chair, that is the heart, excuse me, that's the heart of the problem, isn't it? That from an asset management perspective, the decisions we will make will be around investment primarily, not necessarily around rationalisation, but around investment. And where can we spend our money in the best possible way to get the most value for the community? And at face value, significant upgrades on facilities that aren't being well used is not a good investment of public money. And this is probably one of the reasons why where we need to get to and where we will get to is similar to the aquatic strategy which Council adopted this year, to have a community hall strategy which goes through in detail, looks at each facility and presents a way forward with each of those facilities. But when you look at, in a very broad sense, we have within our region, rightly or wrongly, the facts are within our region, we have between council-owned, community halls, tenanted halls and non-council owned halls, we have approximately 55 halls that service a population of about 50 to 55,000 people. Generally, from a facility planning perspective, a hall for every 10,000 people would be a very high provision. And that doesn't take into account distances and all those sort of things, but just from a provision level, one hall for 10,000 people would be very high. We're running at one hall to every 1,000 people in those locations. So at at that point, we think it's important that we, I guess, identify this to both council and the community to say, well, look, issues with asset maintenance, issues with facility planning, issues with community groups getting volunteers, getting utilisation, raising sufficient money to be able to manage these facilities. It's not hard to see why we've got those issues. So it's important, I think, before we go into a community hall strategy, we take a step back and say, these are the structural constraints we have with our hall network, rather than, as you say, Phil, the capital works plan with upgrades to do with the things that we've identified, such as accessibility, maintenance, those kinds of things, without really understanding and working with the community about where we want to take this. We're not at all suggesting at this point in time that the 50 buildings, you know, if there is some level of rationalisation within the hall network, they don't need to disappear to the community. We could repurpose those. They could potentially be handed back to the community for another use. We could potentially lease those as exclusive use, single-use facilities for community organisations to take on. Potentially there are economic ways in which we could use them with our economic development department, such as you know, economic hubs and business hubs and those kinds of things. There's a whole range of options, but what is very clear from this review is that they're not delivering the purpose in which they are currently intended to be used for, in which they were built. And from a custodianship perspective, we've got an obligation, I believe, to both the community currently and the community that built these halls to have a clear and thorough understanding about where we want to take them.
Thanks, Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan. We've got Councillor Shine.
Thanks, Chair. I really appreciated the review and the briefing paper that's been done in relation to it. I think that it does take into account the value of to the local community. In fact, the fourth item in those boxed items on page 17 refers to appreciating the community value when considering repurpose, divestment and rationalisation. As a new councillor here, I haven't had the opportunity of visiting all that many of the halls. Some of recent times were vacant when Councillor McDonald and myself visited some, and only a handful that were occupied. But the last one I was at was with Councillor Summerfield at Quinaloe. It was a packed occasion, standing room only, literally. I don't know if it's one of our halls or a community hall or who owns it, but it certainly showed the value of a community hall. And I wondered why they wouldn't have used, they probably do have a Rudd Gillard type hall there, but it wouldn't have provided the catering facilities that this one did. People had a meal beforehand at the back of it, the back section, and went to, then attended the formalities. That was sort of contrasted with an event that several councillors, with Councillor McDonald, that Councillor Von Hoff and Councillor Summerfield and Councillor Melissa Taylor and Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan attended out of Biddiston, which was a large occasion too, but that was in an open, sort of semi-open, what I call a Rudd Gillard Hall type situation. And I'm just wondering, one of the negative effects, or probably the only negative effects of those sort of halls in country areas in particular, might have spelt the doom for some of our country halls as being more modern, on school property and more easily accessible. And a lot of these functions in country areas, like the one out at Quinaloe, was of course a school function. It was the end of year trophy awards night. It's a vexed problem. I share Councillor Taylor's concerns for the attachment that people have, whether they use them or not. but that comes at a cost to those ratepayers as well as the ordinary ratepayers in the other ratepayers in the region as well. And some balancing has to be undertaken. It's not going to be an easy task. The review, as I understand it, doesn't recommend the divestment of any particular hall. It just raises, in general terms, what the issues are, and I think it will be a good resource. I support Councillor Summerfield's urging that we deal with these in a little bit more concentrated form over the next year, and look forward to undertaking that examination. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Shine. I'll take that as a comment, and probably the only thing I could add to that is, yeah, exactly. This is it's almost like an audit. So we've got it. So the information that we've got through this report will then be used in future formulating of those exact questions and budgets and things that we've talked about. I've got Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much. Again, endorse the comments of councillors to say thank you for the report, Hugh, and to Ross Planning. There are a number of halls, over a dozen in fact, that are emergency evacuation centres or listed as those. There's obviously certain criteria that you need to reach to be an evacuation centre. Who determines that, and would that be a way of us prioritising work across our halls, those 55 halls, including others we don't own? Is that a way of prioritising, or are some of these halls now almost can be seen as other places that are more suitable for evacuation centres? I'm not sure. Just what's the process in regard to that?
Thank you, Councillor Jeff. Certainly some of our halls do fulfil the disaster management function as emergency evacuation centres. That in any sort of future planning in terms of both investment and management, that would form one of the, I guess, the criteria for how we consider that. In terms of whether or not our halls are the best for that, in some circumstances, yes. In some circumstances, as has been mentioned, they may be the only facility within that community that has the capacity to operate in that way. So it certainly would be taken into account as we do our planning.
Thanks, Councillor McDonald. I've got Councillor McMahon.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I think this is a very necessary, timely and smart piece of work that's been done, and I thank you and your team for doing it, Hugh. It's an interesting stat you just said that I was otherwise unaware of. 55 halls that service 55,000 people, and by your numbers we should be at one hall per 10,000 people, so they're a bit to get your head around. Of course I acknowledge the very vital role halls play for people, and I think it should be said that, you know, if there are people listening, no one's going to come and bulldoze your town hall tomorrow. That's not what we're doing here. That's by any means, that's not the purpose of this work. But I suppose my question comes from the other side, and we have a few halls that are underutilised and people aren't coming to them. We did our register of fees and charges, it was over a year ago now, and you dare not quote it because it's 10 pages long and you'll get something wrong, but the amount it costs to hire a hall is not exorbitant by any means, is it? Do you have those numbers on you as a general rule? And the other question to that is, we were raised to it by members of some of the Rural Chamber of Commerce, the insurance needs that you or your group may need to set up in a hall. So when you combine insurance costs with hire costs, is it an onerous burden on the average community group to hire these halls, or is it a deterrent? My understanding is it's not terribly onerous at all, but could I have a comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Tim, thank you. The first thing I would say is that I wouldn't want Council to interpret my broad analysis of those numbers as saying that we only need 5 halls across that population. It's just simply a way of expressing the disparity we have at the moment. So council can decide, and it's quite okay to decide that we retain the 50 halls, but our responsibility then is to provide you advice as to how we can make that sustainable, both in terms of the human resources required to deliver that level of service and the asset and financial resources required to keep those halls maintained. So the amount of halls we have is entirely a decision for council. That network can be however we want it, but if we look at it from a holistic benchmarking perspective, we can see there's a disparity there. Secondly, in relation to fees, some fees will be set in council-owned halls community-owned halls by that community group that we don't have any control over. Some of those fees are set by us in our fees and charges. What we do and the approach we've taken, which is consistent across our community facilities area, and we did that in 21-22, was that we established a consistent level of subsidy. So if it's Inland Rail or Telstra or a commercial organisation, they pay 100% of fees. We have a community rate which I understand is 35% of that amount. So we've set that as a way for that community group to provide some contribution, but understanding that the ratepayer or the rest of the community is subsidising the rest of that, what that higher cost would be. If council was of the belief that was too high, then in the fees and charges we could reduce that rate, but that would be a matter for us to consider at budget. So we have that ability to do that. I am not the best person to talk to this, but we can get back to you on this. The CDFT team have work with community groups, and we have an insurance policy in relation to public liability for community groups using our facilities. But I believe it's limited to, under the policy, 12 meetings a year, or a certain amount a year. So if you're meeting more than that, then there's an expectation that you would require your own insurance. But I think it's probably best, I have some understanding of that, but I could probably provide that to you in detail.
Thanks, I appreciate that. So I didn't mean to ask you to quote someone else's work on the top, but if that could be taken on notice, followed up on, that'd be great. Just so that we know that what we're offering isn't, as a package deal, a deterrent to community groups wanting to hire these halls. I think that's great. Just finally, and Chair, just a quick follow-up. I think your comment that most hall committees are actually looking forward to this report coming out, and I'd agree, because to me there are some halls in this that we need to prioritise upgrades and maintenance to, and I don't want to sort of say any, but things like Hayden Hall or Emu Creek, where they're actually used fairly regularly, but they're at a deteriorating asset. So it's not a doom and gloom report. It may be these are the ones we need to upgrade as well, but just a comment. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Glenn. I've got Councillor Melissa Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll just echo everyone's words around the table. Thank you, Hugh, and your very capable team, so thank you very much. Interesting point Councillor McDonald brought up about the prioritisation in regards to disaster management. I thought that was a really good point. May I just ask, though, and you may not be able to answer this, so I'm happy to take it on notice, but if in the case of a disaster and it's not our hall that's used, what facility is used for disaster management?
Our disaster management team, and I noticed Kevin's in the room, and if Kevin wanted to provide some additional information on that, but they as part of their disaster preparedness, they identify and understand and plan in various scenarios regarding emergency evacuation centres and places of refuge, whether that be for people or animals or other things. And generally, community halls are certainly considered and used, and that's in addition to ensuring you have the appropriate facilities, you also need to have the appropriate community connection. For instance, with that hall committee, you know, if there's a flood or a fire, we might not be able to get there from the city, but you know, that arrangement with local hall committees is quite vital to open things up and to support us in disaster management activities. That's my very broad understanding of that process, but we can give you some more detail in relation to that.
I'd appreciate that, just because if they're not our halls and we don't have that local connection of a hall committee, then where to from here? Because, you know, floods, fires, you just don't know when or where that's going to happen. So may I have another question? Oh.
Sure, just on that, Kevin, did you have anything further to add just in regards to those points?
Certainly for disaster management and preparedness, we look at a number of issues around the facilities we've got, whether it's council-owned or other facilities. An example is Crow's Nest. We've got a MOU with Crow's Nest Showground
Sorry, Kevin, can you
Association.
just move a little bit closer to the microphone?
So we have for Crow's Nest, we have an MOU with them. We also have one with the showgrounds, Toowoomba Showgrounds, because they're not our facilities. But we do look at the facility itself, the capability of housing people, being able to feed people, what's in those halls, as well as how where those facilities are. So some areas get isolated in an emergency. So Cecil Plains, for instance, gets cut off, doesn't get flooded necessarily, but all the access points get cut off. So we have to look at those issues as well. Plus we work with our neighbouring councils, because some of those, if they have to evacuate, will start to use our facilities as well. So we have that reciprocal process in place as well as we've got a trailer which is portable. We can take to anywhere. And in the last floods in Lockyer Valley, we actually loaned them our trailer.
Okay, thank you. May I have a follow-up? Thanks. Just on a different subject in regarding the halls, Hugh. And you may not be able to answer this for me, but when we're looking at the upgrading or the maintenance of these halls, what are we looking at? 1, 5, 10 teams, and you know, or are you looking at one team from a local community that may be able to maintain a few around that region? Because if it's a local contractor, then that's obviously putting dollars into that community, or are we doing it more from a central location here in Toowoomba?
Sorry, I think I might have missed the first part of that question. So you're talking about the contractors used
to maintain or upgrade or...
a lot of the work, the small maintenance work is done by our trades teams in the first instance. If there are larger jobs, whether they be handled as a project through project services or we tender for that work, we use our procurement policy, which has a local supplier element to that, and we would generally, for those sort of jobs, focus on my terminology is not quite right. I think it's tier 3 builders, and quite a lot of those are local. So generally speaking, for those types of jobs we're talking about, it wouldn't necessarily make sense for a contractor to travel a significant distance. It would be, probably cost prohibitive to do that. So just by virtue of the types of jobs that we're talking about, the strong probability, which is again then backed up by our procurement policy, would be that would either be done internally by our trades teams or by local suppliers.
Okay, thank you. Because there is an example, and this is more of a maintenance, but I can't remember the hall that Councillor Summerfield and I were at. We went, I can't remember, I think it was, I don't know what we were out there for, anyway, something. And the local volunteers mow it. and we pay them to mow it. So, you know, that sort of engagement of volunteers that we employ to maintain is just that little bit of extra income for, you know, those communities that, you know, need it.
Agree, Councillor Melissa, and sometimes those arrangements and the ability of, or the willingness of the community to step up and either volunteer their time or undertake tasks are essentially the way that we can sustainably manage a lot of these facilities. So, you know, very few of these facilities, if at all, were constructed by council. They've been constructed through the initiative and the drive of local communities at a time when there wasn't much else in that location, and they served a significant purpose. And I think it's fair to say that stewardship from the community has continued, and there are a whole lot of arrangements such as those that if we were to pay or to factor in, you know, a contractor, our staff mowing, for instance, that, you know, that would be probably cost prohibitive.
Thanks, Councillor Melissa. We've got Councillor Carol Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just on the emergency evacuation centres, perhaps through you to Kevin, it might be a good idea if councillors could just have a list of those, because I'm aware the Wairema Hall and I think even the Greenmount Hall, there's quite a few of them that are there that are not ours. I just want to mention, this is a good report and we had to have it, I know, but I do disagree with Councillor Tim. This report will guide some strategies and stages in the future. It will guide maintenance upgrades or disposal of the community halls, and that will happen with looking at this hall. So it's no good trying to say it's not, it will. And the other thing I'd like to say to you, through you, Mr Chair, to Hugh, and I know you're trying to make us all feel better about that, but if these halls aren't suitable and don't meet the requirements for the community, I don't believe in small communities anybody else is going to reuse them for anything, because if they can't afford to keep them upgraded and going now, I don't believe that they're going, with the exception of the Felton Hall, which, by the way, my father-in-law was involved with building, the first Felton Hall. It was actually, I don't think it was bought, but it was taken and put on a farm and used for something there. But that would be the anomaly, because I don't believe that that would happen. We've got to look at this with our eyes open and not try to gild the lily, because it is what it is. I'd like to also mention, we're sitting here talking about community halls. If our beloved iconic Empire Theatre had to stand on its own without council maintenance and upgrades and the community service obligations, it wouldn't stand on its own either. So at the end of the day, you know, that sort of thing needs to be taken into account too. That's all I'd ask. Thank you.
So I might just ask the CEO to comment there. Brian?
Councillor, I'm a little concerned that some conclusions are being drawn from this report, basically saying the adoption of this report will result in the closure or the effect of, you know, closing down some of those facilities. The report clearly has 4 themes in there: creating more appealing facilities, creating community hubs, ensuring sustainable management resourcing, and appreciating the community value when considering repurposing, divestment and rationalisation. And in itself, in that last area when the issue about rationalisation was raised, there's a comment in this report that says, if uses cannot be enhanced even after the potential of losing the facility is highlighted to the community, then it would be appropriate for council to consider winding up the community hall asset. There'd be a process that council would come back to council for those decisions. The adoption of this report, I think, the benefits and the potential development and enhancing of these facilities, that dimension I think has been missed in this debate. I think we need to be very careful about sending a very negative message to our community saying we're shutting down facilities, and this report is instigating that shutdown. This report is basically saying if it ever comes to that point after you go through a whole process, it would always come back to council to make those final decisions. Officers will not be closing facilities. It will be council's decisions, and there'll be a whole lot of bridges to cross before we get to that point. And a lot of those advantages about how we
wish to enhance and improve those facilities and engage with the communities about what they can do to increase their usage of those facilities and to meet the community's needs. Those dimensions are all picked up in this report and the accompanying Ross report. So I think the message that potentially could go out to our community is the wrong message we're giving them at this point in time.
Thanks, Mr. CEO. Hugh. Mr. Mayor?
Look, can I say from my life's experience, I've seen that halls have a natural life. In the community that I lived in as a youngster, the community came together and built a hall beside the school. It was built by the community and it was amazing for that community. The school went, you got amalgamations of properties, the hall was sold, and it's a totally different environment. Of course, people drive cars to town now. They drive 20 k's to town, they're probably feeling better off before it. But I think there's an era for halls. The halls that are close to Toowoomba, where there's growing population, will need to be kept as long as we possibly can. But when I look at halls like, there's a mention of the Bringalilli Hall there, which is out towards the Southern Downs boundary or the Gundawindi boundary, that hall is amazing. The people there want to keep it, and that's the will. You've got to get the will of people who want to keep the hall. In my particular case, the hall that we had, it's been sold, it's moved, it's got another purpose, and that community now engages directly with the town nearby. It used to have a cheese factory, it used to have a school, it used to have a hall, doesn't have any of that. So there's a change, and we have to recognise that, and that's probably more acute in the more remote areas further out.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take that as a comment. Look, if there are any further questions in regards to this, probably just the last thing I might just say to this is probably echoing the words of the CEO before, and I thought it sort of sums it up pretty well, pretty succinctly in the executive summary, which says the purpose of the Rural Halls Review is to guide prioritised provision and development of facilities to meet the diverse needs of the region's rural communities. By identifying the condition and supply of the existing infrastructure network and comparing this with existing and projected demand, the review will assist Council to prioritise resources and investment to meet user requirements. And the good part about that is all of these things that we've been now talking about for 43 minutes highlights, I think, a number of reasons why this table has made it very clear to the public the value that it sees in these particular facilities from a social point of view, from all of the reasons that have actually been listed here. What this report now does is obviously identifies the condition of them and what work sort of need to be done and the demand and things like that. So I think it is really a positive step with it. And I think there's also, we've seen, Hugh, probably to take note, there's been a desire from a few people around the table, and probably, I'm sure, probably would be by most, that we actually have, I know they're probably booked with info sessions, but next year having that opportunity to actually look at a number of these facilities in isolation, or, you know, over, as we said, there's 55 of them, so we're not going to do them all in one hit, but the opportunity to actually look at closely or understand more about each of these facilities and what value they have, and so we really understand what's there and what opportunities can be, you know, can be identified moving forward.
Just to clarify, also, Chair, I guess in respect to Councillor Summerfield's desire and the desire to look into these in detail, from a staff perspective, we would envisage similar again to our aquatic strategy, where we went through each of those facilities in detail. We would deliver a community hall strategy, which would give us the opportunity to consider each of these facilities in the level of detail and the ability to look at them within the network and to set some clear recommendations that we can move forward with.
Thanks, Hugh. So I do have a mover and a seconder. It was moved by Councillor Carl. It was seconded by Councillor McMahon. Does anyone wish to go into debate around this one? So the recommendation is there before us. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thanks, Hugh. Thanks, Amanda. What do you got? We've got one more item in Environment Community, councillors, so if you're happy to proceed with it before we break, unless anyone has a burning desire to break now. We're good? We go to item 5 then, councillors. It is the quote or tender consideration plan for the Toowoomba Carnival of Flowers. So joining us up here is Kate Scott, the coordinator of Carnival. Paul Reynolds, manager in the back here as well. So I might hand directly over to Kate.
Through you, Chair. I'll take the report as read. It is exactly the same as what it was last year. Through finance, we've actually also been able to have an inclusion this year just to say that we won't be bringing this tender consideration plan back to you unless there's changes. So there's 3 areas that it includes: the entertainment and talent, that includes singers, entertainers, MCs, things like that, and also our marketing. That allows us to be very rigorous in our negotiations when we're dealing with different media agencies to make sure that we are getting the best dollar value for us. And the third component is having a preferred supplier for the marshalling of the parade, and that's through Scouts, Darling Downs.
Thanks, Kate. And just before I go to questions, I might add thanks as well to Anne Marie, as you said, for the work through finance. Obviously, it's been involved with this one as well. Sorry, I think I had Councillor Shine first.
Yeah, no, thanks. I was just wondering when I was reading it whether there was some requirement under the legislation for it to be done on a yearly or a repetitive basis, or why can't you do it once every 4 years when you're resolving to do it probably once a term or something like that? I forget now. Is that right?
There's currently no legislation that requires us to do it annually, as long as we have council adoption that the plan is correct at the time, and we will be flexible as per the trends, with the industry. If we need to come back, we won't hesitate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Shine. Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, thank you, Kate. Just one really quick question. On page, sorry, I thought there were others before me, Chair. 94 of board books. When we're talking about the entertainment and talent, and we just talk about trend variations for one-off engagements. Sometimes I read things and I'm not sure what they mean. What's that one mean?
Every year we have a strategy to be able to look at who's available in the market and look at what trends are happening. So if there's a hip-hop trend that comes our way, we want to be able to engage, local hip-hop or state or national-based hip-hop, those kind of things. So we want to be very reflective of what's happening and what's going to be able to get us really good marketing and also ticket sales at the end of the day, especially with our entertainment.
Yeah, nice. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Von Hoff. Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'm more than happy that this comes every year. I think it's important. It's a changing feast, and I don't mind the read, and I'm sure it doesn't take you long to pull the report together because it's very similar each year, so I'm very comfortable that it comes. But I did wonder, Kate, in that, you've got the less than 5,000 and then 5,000 to 50 or whatever it is. I just wondered, with the less than 5,000, if there's a quote, someone's wanting to sell, I don't know, iced Eskimos at both Queen's Park and Laurel Bank Park, would they be 2 separate quotes, or would they be considered one? Because if they were 2 separate ones, they'd probably not breach the 5,000 mark, but if they were one for the 2, it would probably breach the 5. I'm guessing, whatever it is, I'm just giving you an example of what I'm getting at here. I just worry that they can stay under the 5,000 radar if they're just doing them individually instead of combined. I guess what I'm trying to get at is I want to ensure everyone gets a go at this and that there's no monopoly.
We don't split invoices, so if one supplier's wanting to go over many locations, we actually put our quote requests out to actually showcase the full location. So it's then up to them to showcase within that one quote how many locations they're picking, so we can then see how many people are looking at the different locations. So we don't split invoices across locations for one supplier.
Okay, so you can see my point there, can't you? So I actually have a problem with that. I would like to think that everyone, every child wins a prize when it comes to the Carnival of Flowers. Every business should get the opportunity, and that we shouldn't be allowing that, because under 5,000, it's just one tender, one quote is all that's required. Whereas when you step up to the 5,000 plus, it's more. And that gives more competitive market, more competitive edge, and less chance of monopoly, I guess.
If we're looking at the entertainment and talent side of things, we definitely put out a schedule of what's available and everyone put an expression of interest in to see what they would like to do. And of course, most people put in that they want to perform at every location. And then we go through and slot everyone in. And it's very rare that we get someone doing a duplicate, just because we try and make sure that everyone gets a slice of the pie. So that's our first strategy. It's when people fall out or we've got to quickly try and fill a gap at the last minute, that's when people get second engagements, usually is the trend.
Yeah, no, and slice of the pie was probably more what I was getting at, was the food side of it. Or does the food not come into this?
The food, if you're looking at the park, so the food trucks in the park, for instance, or that is done by a quote. So we actually go out and do an expression of interest and tell everyone the dates and times and locations that we want food trucks in the park. That's not covered under this, and that's done separately. So we go out to, I think the database at the moment sitting well over 200 entities locally within the Toowoomba region only, get access to that. If we look at the Festival of Food and Wine, that is a database that we hold, that we send out. Also, I think it's sitting at probably just under 200 of those people that are interested in participating in a food holder at the Festival of Food and Wine. Because it's quite a different setup there, that we provide a lot of infrastructure. It's quite different to operating a food truck in the park.
Yeah, okay, that's good. That's good clarity. Thank you. So that was going to be my next question. So we've led into that very well. So you'll recall that last year there wasn't a great deal of advertising around the vendors. Something had happened. I don't know whether it was COVID related or whatever. I recall you telling us that you were unable to get it out to everybody. So have steps been put in place for next year to ensure that everyone gets a crack, as in advertised broadly, not just an email out to current people that are on our database, but that it would actually be advertised very broadly to ensure that everybody is given the opportunity?
Yes, we're going over and above the procurement policy requirements in how we procure that. So there'll be social media campaigns, as well as engaging a lot of different associations and social groups that can get the word out for us as well. So we're doing over and above what the procurement policy is asking us to do for that.
Okay, so sorry, one last question if I could, Chair. Just in relation to sponsorship, and it's not really covered in this. I don't know whether something comes to us later or not, but I just wonder what transparency do we have around sponsorship? For example, you know, we've got Grand Central, Heritage, I think are our two main ones. You'll be able to tell me more than I know. But do we have some sort of transparency around how we source that sponsorship and how long their contracts are for and all that sort of thing?
You're spot on. My calendar this week's all about sponsorships, so it's a timely question. We actually have a sponsorship prospectus that will be put out in the market later in December. It's probably about 2 weeks away. That'll be open for about a month, 6 weeks. It'll be closing in January. That'll actually give everyone in the community, or we actually will be marketing that across the state and nationally as well in different market segments to actually let everyone know that council is seeking sponsorship for Toowoomba Carnival of Flowers events. That is in line with the sponsorship procurement of incoming sponsorship, and there's some talk around the templates and things like that we're actually distributing out across the wider council organisation to support that as well. So that'll be a whole campaign that we put in place over the next 6 weeks, and then there'll be assessment of that, and then depending on the value of it, currently council sees all incoming sponsorship over $10,000. So any I suppose expressions of interest or any offers over 10,000 will be coming to council as per the policy at the moment.
Thanks very much for your help.
Thanks, Councillor Summerfield. Councillor Melissa Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Kate, for the report. Councillor Summerfield just opened a door because I was going to ask whether it involved food trucks, etc., because I just didn't know how far this particular report went. So my question is, when it comes to franchises, where do we stand with that? Because from a point of view, I'm just looking at it from a small business or a business perspective. If I have a franchise, I'm employing local people, I pay local rates, I pay my licenses. So to me, a franchise is just like a local small business. So what's our policy on that, please?
There's two different stances on that. For the parks, so any food trucks in the parks, it's an open, whoever would like to apply for that and has ability to provide the services that we want. There's no restrictions on franchises or leased businesses, and we go out to everyone in the community for that. For the Festival of Food and Wine, historically we've wanted to provide a unique only in Toowoomba opportunity on that weekend for Festival of Food and Wine. So we look at individual businesses that you cannot replicate that offering anywhere else in the state or nationally. So that's the stance that we've had just for Festival of Food and Wine in the past, so we can have that unique product offering for that event.
May I? Thank you. So what if it's a unique offering within the local area, but it is a state or national franchise? Because as I said, they still employ local people and they're still a local business. They may just be under a banner. I mean, I was part of a franchise that was quite unique to the area, but we were part of a national franchise. So to me, that's just a little bit grey. How do we stand with that?
And it's definitely something we can continue to look at. Food trucks and also the stall holders at Festival of Food and Wine is actually a council debtor. They pay us money, so they pay us a stall holder fee. So that isn't actually captured under this procurement plan because we're not paying them money. So that is a separate thing, and it's something that we can always generally, continue to look at and improve and get feedback from the community on what they want to see at the Festival of Food and Wine.
Just a comment, if I may, I have, and I know I'm not the only one sitting around the table that's received quite substantial feedback on that particular topic. So it'd be great just to have a look at that before next year and before it's too late. That'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Melissa. We've got Councillor Carol Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Kate. How are you? I know you can't go out and bring people in, but there was a big scarcity, I suppose, at the Food and Wine this year for affordable. There were a lot of wine places, a lot of food, but not much for families, as in, the drink place that used to be there with the ice cream sodas and things. And I don't know, a lot of families commented to me, I was up there a few times, about, nothing for the kids. Now, we can't make people come, I know. But even just an ice cream place, there wasn't an ice cream place, ice cream truck or something like that, is there anything we can do about that? Perhaps they haven't inquired, but, just a chip van, it doesn't have to be a lot, just something for children and people to access if they're not drinking. And I wasn't drinking because I had a car both times and there was very little. Even only one place was selling soft drinks. One place, and you couldn't, they ran out of water. That's not our issue, I guess, but is there anything we can do to try to attract, and I know we've got local vendors, that ice cream and perhaps a chip, so just wanted to mention that. I'm sure we've had comment on that, but I just wanted to bring it up because it's always been there and it wasn't this last year. Thanks.
Through you, Chair. Unfortunately, we had some long-standing stall holders that weren't able to make it this year due to labour shortages and also getting stock, the quality of stock that they weren't able to get. So we were just like everyone else in the community that unfortunately were unable to maintain the level of stall holders that we wanted on site. We're still continuing to work. We worked with them all last year and we continue to work with them to see how we can support them a little bit more. If it is about labour, can we help, get them some different labour from other sources? So we're very aware of that and we're working towards it for this year.
Thank you very much. I thought you'd be aware of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Just happy to move, Chair.
You happy to second? Councillor McMahon. So I've got a mover and a seconder. If there are any further questions in regards to that, does anyone wish to go into debate? There is a recommendation there, before us. Does anyone wish to go into debate? Right, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried. Thanks, Kate. Councillors, we go, so we're going to adjournment. So can I get a motion that we motion to adjourn. Councillor Von Hoff, Councillor McMahon, all those in favour? It's carried. We'll resume at 10:30. To fine.
We'll resume or get underway for the Finance and Business Strategy Committee meeting for the month of December. Welcome, Mayor and councillors. Welcome to CEO, General Manager Anne-Marie. Welcome to you. And we also have the Acting Manager for all things communications, Alan Luther. Thank you, Alan, for coming in today. And Daniel Loader, who'll be presenting after we introduce, or Anne-Marie introduces him. But before we begin, can I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions, bold ambitions of Australia's first people. And also acknowledge all those watching at home or wherever they may be, and those in the gallery. Thank you for your attendance today. It's very much appreciated. Our second item, councillors, is attendance, including apologies, and we have no apologies. Leave of absence will be at the ordinary meeting if there is any, and no conflicts of interest have been recorded for today's meeting. Therefore, we move directly on to item number 3, which is the social media policy, and I'll hand over to Anne-Marie to introduce the item. Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. So just one report from Finance and Business Strategy Group this morning. We considered these amendments at an information session on the 27th of September. So those amendments are incorporated in the documentation presented to you today. I've got Daniel here to answer any questions, and also Mel Kavanagh if there's any questions in the technical area around this one. So happy to hand over.
Thanks very much, Anne-Marie. Are there any questions? Daniel is here to answer those questions as the author of this report. As Anne-Marie said, we have scrutinised this on a couple of occasions. Councillor Vonhoff, then Councillor McMahon.
Thanks, Chair, through you. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Excuse me. On page 168 of Board Books, under Legal Issues, nil. And that really surprised me because we know that this is an area that is actually extremely fraught from a legal perspective, and there's some really notable examples across the country of where the personal and the public of employees with social media stops and starts. So some words from you, please, about why there are no legal issues that have been considered here, if you're comfortable with that.
I will hand directly over to Daniel. Thank you.
Great question. Don't know if I can do it justice. Advice on that one has been provided from Governance and Legal Services. So they didn't outline any particular legal issues in relation to this policy, not so much on the topic in general, across in all its implications to council and to council staff.
I just might add to that one. So I think what we're talking about here is the legal issues with regards to the policy rather than the implications of something that may appear in social media. So I think there's a difference between the two, but I'm very happy to take a question on notice and provide a response.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. If you wouldn't mind, ahead of next week's meeting, because I understand what you're saying about the separation, but of course the application of the policy is where these issues do arise. So some guidance, that would be appreciated.
I'll just ask the CEO if he'd like to make a comment there. Thanks.
I think some of the questions that you're seeking answers to, in the actual policy itself, you'll see the related policies documents on page 174 of 184. The Queensland Council of Social Media Community Guidelines, that covers off a lot of those issues that you've actually raised off. They're explored, and the directions coming through by the implications and the application of that is a lot of those issues are actually covered off within that. So that might answer some of your questions.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I will have a look. It's also for employees as well. So, you know, there are, not at this council, but there are examples nationally, internationally, of when a person does something really objectionable with their social media accounts, how does that interact with council's values? And it gets tricky. It gets very tricky.
That component would be picked up within the social media guidelines and also the Code of Conduct for council employees. So there's mention of that within that documentation as well. So they do link back. The issue about there potentially, obviously, could be legal questions that need to be resolved in any circumstances where there was an issue raised about inappropriate use of those things in themselves would be explored by our legal and governance people, ensuring that the actions comply with the Code of Conduct, basically, whether it be through the council laws or through our office, our staff. So the links are in those related policies. I think, as Anne-Marie just said before, the legal implications in relation to the adoption of a policy is the only legal issues that we've actually explored in relation to that here. It's not usual to do that within that policy document unless there is something that's outstanding. So if we're compliant with the guidelines from the state in relation to councillors and through our own, that covers off on those legal issues in most circumstances.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that. I'll go through those related documents and try to refine what I'm trying to ask, and then I'll circulate that. Thank you.
Councillor McMahon.
Chair, thanks. Just looking at the track changes, and I'm on page 179. The Mayor's official Twitter account, does that get regularly updated? Yep. Yep, it does. Good. When we have new social media channels, and I assume this is within council, so like our library, our art gallery, swimming pools, those kind of things, have one and they can apply for it because it's a specialist market, not generally covered by the whole Toowoomba region social media. Are those requests regular, and do they take, like obviously they take a while to be processed, and you guys have got to know what media accounts the council has for obvious reasons. So can you just talk me through the process if, like, I don't know, the Parks team, for example, wanted a TR, and I'm not saying they do, if they wanted Park social media, how would they go about doing that?
Through Chair, great question, thank you. They are not regular. We would get a couple of a year. Right. When they occur, the branch manager provides a business case to the manager of customer communication engagement to explain the need for a new social media account, explain how that will be resourced, and a few other of those prerequisites required to cover off. That decision is then made in consultation with the general manager, FBS, and support provided back to the business area to make that happen. So we do actually have one in progress right at the moment. So the time that it would take depends on how organised and the business area is. Can take a week, can take some months.
No, sure. So it's not make a phone call. I want an Instagram.
No, there's a written. Yeah, yeah. There's a written process and a number of prerequisites that are asked to be addressed in the business case. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Councillor Netzi.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Anne-Marie and Daniel. I note that most of this social media, even though it's a broad outline, it's really councillors do have their own that they do through state government. I just wondered, is there training provided to our staff to ensure that they understand? Because it'd be really concerning if staff weren't aware that there are guidelines directed to them in this policy. I think it's really important that, because if they're ignorant of it and they go and do something, it's very difficult for them to then be, reprimanded or whatever the process is if they're unaware that this policy affects. And pretty well everyone, everyone on our staff are probably on social media in some form or another. And I'm just thinking about protecting them to make sure that they're alert to the fact that these guidelines do have repercussions for them basically, are they provided with training is my first question.
Yes, in two forms, sorry, through your Chair, in two forms. through the induction process, we have a video and staff there to present where possible that explains that process to oncoming onboarding staff. And then in addition to that, we have information available on the intranet, which we promote from time to time.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. I hope that's enough. I know I get guided to links to find something out sometimes, and it's like, oh gosh, another thing to read.
Just on that, before you go, Councillor Nancy, do we have updates as well, Daniel, that come through, whether it's through the CEO roadshows or wherever that just a reminder?
And through the code of conduct, the code of conduct training. Yep.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
there is additional.
That all
yeah.
staff, yeah.
Yeah, all right, that's good, thank you.
Thank
So
you.
then my other question was around, a little bit of promo here, the Crow's Nest Art Gallery. I went online yesterday when I was reading the report to see whether they had a Facebook page. And there is one there, but it's just a basic thing just showing where they're located. And I think there's 93 likes or follows or whatever on it. But there's no posts or anything. And I don't even know whether council owns that web page or whether somebody else, probably local in Crow's Nest, does. So I just think that if we have one art gallery having a Facebook page, the other two should too. So Rosalie and Crow's Nest. I just think that there's great opportunity for people who are visiting our region who aren't aware of those art galleries. They're great art galleries. That there should be opportunity for them to be promoted as well. And it doesn't have to be much, you know, it can just be when a new exhibition's coming online or something like that, just so that people can, if they're visiting the region, do a little squizzy on Facebook, see whether there's, you know, what's happening in those art galleries. So, and I guess it's the same for the pools as well. Why should Toowoomba, Milne Bay have a Facebook page? And I don't know, they do, but I'm just saying as an example, why should Toowoomba have one, but the regional areas don't? I think we've got to be fair and equitable to our whole region, I guess, is probably what I'm saying. And I know it means more work, more bringing together of information and whatever, but I think it's beneficial to all of our region, for visitors and for locals for that matter. Thanks.
Just a
Bit
comment
of
on
a
that.
comment on there, Daniel?
A comment on that one, Councillor. It is a requirement as part of the business case that where a business area applies for a new social media channel that they provide across the whole of the region. So in the case of example provided for art galleries, that is the case. It's up to the business area to make sure that content is sourced from multiple locations, so for example libraries or parks, that it will cover the whole region. That's one social account.
I'm happy to take that one on notice, Councillor, and just have a look and see what we're including and if we can improve that.
Thank you very much, because if it's just under the Toowoomba Regional Art Gallery and we're talking about Crow's Nest, it doesn't get captured. Thank you, Anne-Marie.
No, good point. Councillor, any other questions for Daniel? Councillor Rebecca?
Thanks, Chair, through you. Page, again, 179, under section 3.4, bullying, harassment and defamation on council channels. I'm glad that it's been changed from deformation on council channels, but if we go down to the second paragraph, and it says community, there's two parts to my question here through you, Chair. It says community guidelines are available on each council social media channel outlining acceptable participant behaviour. And the guidelines also provide for the removal of comments, of content or comments that are deemed to be harassment or bullying in nature. So my first question is, since Facebook's changed, that opportunity for council channels to post, you know, comments or content that is considered to be bullying and harassment in nature has been removed. And I just had a quick look then, and I can't see where those sort of disclaimers are actually listed on our site. And also then it's even more of an issue with Instagram, because you're limited by characters in that explanation of you will be kicked off, and if you fall foul. Same with Twitter as well. So where do we actually, when we're saying that it's on those channels, where is it?
We might through Mel, would you like to come forward just up to this microphone here, if you don't mind? It's the bottom right-hand corner. Just happy to talk into the microphone. Thank you and welcome to you, Mel.
Thank you very much, everyone. So across all of our council social media pages, we do have a link on there that in the About section that links back to the community guidelines. I know that's especially true on the Facebook page. They're also available on our website for people to access as well. And if there is any behaviour that's identified as bullying or harassment, then that person is issued with a warning and referred back to the community guidelines.
Okay, thank you. Then that's my next question. And is that also the case for Twitter, the link to those guidelines? Is that also the case on Twitter and Instagram? It is?
Yes.
It is? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then my second question, because this again is tricky territory, because we have, each of us as councillors and as a council, have issues or just people who find council or us individually to be objectionable, and they exercise their right to inform us of their objections, and that is their right in this country, freedom of speech. They're entitled to say those sort of things to us. And we have in here the wording that comments that are deemed to be harassment or bullying in nature and users who persist in posting content of this nature will be blocked. And maybe it goes into some more of those details, but who is making the decisions about users being blocked? Because again, that strikes me as a really legally fraught area, because we can't impinge on people's right to say things that we might not want to hear all the time, but that is their right. So who makes those decisions?
Do you want to take that one? Through you, Chair.
Yeah. Yep.
So that decision comes back to me. It's very rare. The number of people we have blocked in the last 10 years, I could probably count on one hand. So that's extremely rare. And they are very obvious circumstances where it's not someone providing some feedback. It's malicious behaviour. So that's generally a discussion with Mel and the team and myself. And on those occasions, I'm typically involving others like governance and legal for specific advice.
Okay.
But it's extremely rare.
Okay, thanks. That gives us an idea of where the bar is set. Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors, in regard to the policy? If not, there's a motion before us, which is regard to, and I'll read it very quickly, that the revised 2.64 social media policy attachment 1 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Shine.
I'm happy to move, but also just
comment?
in relation to that last matter, I'm just wondering.
Much better. Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether for example, a councillor who might have been the subject of the criticism, is that councillor advised of it? In order for that councillor to take some legal action if she or he so desires.
Yes.
So you're happy to move, Councillor Shine? So you second?
Following on from Councillor Shines, I have been the subject of a couple of very malicious comments in the days of the detention basins, 2 death threats that were written on a social media page and emailed to me directly. I never received a thing. You weren't here then, I don't believe, Daniel. So is that something new that has happened? Because I think it is only fair. I mean, you have that choice whether you want to do something about it or you don't. But I think even more important is that you're actually aware that something like that has been said about you personally. So that is our policy now. It wasn't some time ago because it never, somebody alerted me to it outside council. Thank you.
Possibly that's changed. I can't comment on that, but we're talking about two different things. We're talking about people making comments on a council-owned asset, a social media channel, or making a comment generally on a private page. Or is it? Yeah. So we'll only get involved when the one's made on a council page. Yeah.
Mayor, you were seconding that? Did you put your hand up to second that? So we're going to move Councillor Shine, second to the Mayor. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Just in closing, on behalf of the portfolio lead, Councillor Shine, myself and Anne-Marie, and indeed everyone, because we're all on the committee, thank you for the last 12 months, calendar year. Appreciate your participation in our committee. It's been a very big year, in fact, in many ways. So, but Anne-Marie, if you can pass on our best wishes for festive season to you and your team, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
There is, in fact, no matters to deal with. But in saying that, I think it's important that we realise the vibrant community that we live in. And for those of us who went out to Wellcamp last Thursday to see the opportunities there are there, for those of us who in fact went to the Kabala base the other day, I think that whilst they don't say much about what they're doing, but the importance of that Kabala base, not only to the defence of this nation, but also to the economy here in the future, is important. I think we're very lucky to live where we live, and there are just a couple of things that happened last week. So in the economic development area, I think we've got a lot of opportunity, and it's a great place to be, and he's hoping that the future will continue to see opportunity grow. And I think the initial one with the Virgin Space situation has tremendous potential in many, many respects. So with that, I think we'll close the meeting and once again endorse Councillor McDonald's words that it's been a difficult at times year, but it's also been a great year, and I think we ought to be very proud that we in fact sit around this table. I'll close the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Council, as we resume the Environment and Community Committee meeting, as our next item is in confidential, can I get a motion that we go into confidential? Moved by Councillor Carroll Taylor, seconded by Councillor McDonald. All those in favour? Okay, thank you. So welcome back to the Environment Community Committee meeting for the month of December. So item 8 on the agenda, there is a recommendation. I'll read it. Is that Council 1 advised Toowoomba and Surat Basin Enterprises that the current secondment arrangement will be allowed to lapse on the 28th of Feb 2023 and shall not be renewed. And 2 is authorise the Chief Executive Officer to enter negotiations and report to Council on a proposed contractual arrangement with Toowoomba and Surat Basin Enterprise to achieve maximum benefit for the Toowoomba region in regard to Olympic preparedness. That is the recommendation. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor McMahon. Anyone wish to go into debate? All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thank you for your time this year. That does conclude